morning Year 10, Mr. Davidson here, and I'm going to give you a few instructions and tips on how to complete the work this week. However, first things first, really important is if you were in school last week, so that was Monday the 15th to Friday the 19th of June, then you need to do last week's work because you didn't do it last week because you were in school with me. So you need to go to Teams and complete Rivers week 2. If you've done that and you weren't in school last week, then you need to do this week's work, which I'm going to talk through in a moment, which is Rivers week 3. So with that out of the way, let's talk through the work we need to do this week. So we're going to start looking now at the specific features and landforms that you find along a river. So over the last few weeks, you've been looking at erosion and deposition and how the shape of the river channel, so narrow and shallow in the upper course to wide and deep in the lower course, how the shape has changed throughout the course of a river. We're now going to go through again and we're going to look at the specific features and landforms and landscapes that you associate with different parts of the river. So the way to make this similar to the coasts unit is that, do you remember when we looked at headlands and bays and beaches and caves and stacks and stumps and arches, etc., and wave cut platforms? Those are all examples of landforms or features, so specific parts of the landscape that we can talk about. We're going to do the same thing for rivers. Obviously, we don't get headlands and bays because we're not on the coast, we're in a river, but you do get very specific features and landforms. And you're also going to continue doing your research on either the River Thames or the River Severn. So first things first, there are quite a few instructions here, but I've tried to condense it as much as possible. And actually, it's a fairly straightforward week. I've just given you as detailed instructions as I can that are condensed to make it easier for you to understand. The major part of your work this week is going to be a research poster or a research presentation based on the textbook to look at these different landforms and features. So you can, if you want, do this on paper, but if you're doing it on a computer, I'd like you to either use PowerPoint or I'd like you to use Word to create a revision poster. This poster is going to be A3, so you can fit everything on one page. And in case you're not sure of how to do that on Word, because normally if you open Word, it's just an A4 page, you need to set your page to A3. So the way to do it is this. Open a new Word document. And I've put instructions here for you. Open a new Word document. Click on Page Layout, which is a tab at the top. And you need to do 3 things now to give yourself as much room as possible. The first thing you need to do is click on Size and turn your page to A3 by clicking once on A3. And that will turn the page to A3 size. It will make it bigger. You then need to go to Landscape because it's a landscape poster, not a portrait. So click on Orientation and click on Landscape and it will change it to Landscape. And then finally, to give yourself as much room as possible, I would like you to click on Margins and then click on Narrow. That will give you, if I zoom out a bit, as much room as possible on your page. Obviously this is not to scale, but this is now an A3 page. And then you can then copy and paste diagrams from the internet. You can add text boxes or you can type on this to add the information you need to make a brilliant revision resource. Okay, let's get rid of that and let's talk through what I need you to do this week. So you've got 3 main tasks, a bit of research, and then your quiz. So your 3 main tasks. You're going to need to use pages 119 to 121 in the textbook. And you're essentially going to look at a key feature in the upper course, a key feature in the middle course, and a key feature in the lower course of a river. And you're going to explain how they're made and how they change over time. So let's go through them very briefly to hopefully give you a few pointers. The first set of features you need to look at are waterfalls and gorges. So this is on page 119 of the textbook, and this is available on Teams. You need to look at these diagrams, look through the text, and answer these 5 questions. So where do I find waterfalls and gorges? Why do you need different types of rock for a waterfall to form? Because if you just had one type of rock in a river, you wouldn't get waterfalls. And when I say type of rock in a river, I mean the rock that the water is flowing over. So if I dug down through the mud and silt and clay on the bottom of a river, I would get to rock. And that is what is being eroded by the river over time. So you need to explain, how are gorges and waterfalls made, and how can a waterfall turn a flat landscape into a really steep-sided valley, a gorge, over time. Some of you might remember we did something almost identical all the way back in year 8. So if you can remember that, you've already got a massive jump start in understanding it at GCSE level. So I'd expect to see on your poster a couple of labelled diagrams, maybe with some steps and an annotation that shows answers to these 5 questions. Once you've done that, we're going to move from the upper course down to the middle course of the river. So I'm going to go to the next page of the textbook. I'm going to look at page 120. And in the middle course of a river, again, you did this in year 8, so we're just building our knowledge. We're going to look at how meanders and oxbow lakes are made. So whereas waterfalls and gorges are only made through erosion, the landscape is being worn away by the river to create those landscapes. In the middle course of a river, because the river has sped up a bit, but it's not universally, the whole river isn't the same speed. There are different speeds of water. And remember, fast water erodes and slow water deposits material. So in the middle course of a river, because we've got erosion and deposition happening, we get meanders and oxbow lakes. So I won't explain them in detail here because that's what the textbook and your research is for. However, I want you to look over this information. I would not really think about the blue box. If you want to challenge yourself, you can read about pools and riffles. However, it's just meanders and oxbow lakes I want almost all of you to focus on unless you want to challenge yourself. So you need to find out which part of the river are these features found in. Is vertical, so downwards erosion, or lateral, sideways erosion, needed for meanders to form? And remember, a meander is just a bend in a river, but the fastest water travels around the outside bend of a meander, and the slowest water travels around the inside of a meander. So how can you link that to erosion and deposition? And finally, given enough time, some meanders get cut off to form oxbow lakes. Can you explain why that happens? And again, on your A3 poster or in your PowerPoint or in your book, you're going to be adding diagrams, so you could paste them from the internet and that's fine. But what you can't paste is just text straight from the internet. I want to see that you've summarized the key details from the textbook or from your online revision and that you haven't copied. And then the final bit of your research poster, your revision poster this week, is to go down to the lower course of a river. So we looked at waterfalls and gorges in the upper course. We looked at meanders and oxbow lakes in the middle course. And then in the lower course of a river, so that's where the river meets the sea, we're going to look at floodplains and levees. Now, we very briefly touched on this in year 8, but we didn't go into great detail. So this will be probably a bit newer for most of you. So in the lower course, where the river begins to meet the sea, the water slows down quite dramatically. In general, the lower course is very quick, but as you get towards the sea and the seawater is pushing up into the mouth of a river, that slows the river right down. And remember, slow water doesn't have much energy, so it can't carry a lot of material, and it drops all of the material it has, it deposits it. And I would like you to explain how deposition can create 2 specific features: levees, which are these kind of raised riverbanks, and floodplains. And I'd like you to explain the answer to these 5 questions. So what is a floodplain and a levee? Why is a floodplain called a floodplain? Might seem like a simple question, but we need to be clear. What are floodplains made of? How are they formed? And why do levees form along the banks of a river? And once you've done that, you'll have this brilliant revision poster that explains upper course, middle course, and lower course features on a river. So once you've done that, you're pretty much all the way there. You've just got 2 things left to do. One of them is to add to your ongoing research project. So remember, over the last couple of weeks, you've been looking at either the River Severn or the River Thames. I'd like you to go back to that document and I'd like you to add some additional information on meanders and floodplains in your chosen river. So you might want to just go to Google and search for River Severn meanders or River Thames floodplain and look at any of the first 2 or 3 links. I think there are some BBC articles, there's a couple of Wikipedia pages, and I think there's a bite-sized page as well. And I'd like you to answer these questions. And I want you to answer these questions because although they might not seem super specific or really in depth, this is the sort of information I want you to drop into your longer answers, so your 6-mark and your 9-mark answers, to give you that really detailed knowledge, to show any examiner who's marking your GCSEs that, this student knows their theory, they've also got some specific examples that they can draw on to make their answer more detailed. So once you've done that, all you've got left to do is your weekly quiz, which I'll post to Teams on Wednesday. I've also given you 3 links here for the upper, middle and lower course. That just takes you to the BBC bite-sized pages that will help you understand some of the more complex stuff in the textbook. So remember, if you have any questions at all, please email me or your teacher or put it on Teams or watch this video again and see if that helps. We'll be happy to help you. Also remember, if you were in school last week, do not do this work that I've just explained. You need to do last week's work, which is Rivers Week 2. If you weren't in school last week, you need to do this work that this video is about, Rivers Week 3. So there's your work. I really look forward to seeing it at the end of the week and marking your quizzes. Do let me know if you need any help. Cheers very much, guys.